All right, Be Your Elite Podcast, episode 13.
13.
Me and Mom here today.
Deja vu.
What? Why would that be deja vu?
Groundhog's Day. I don't know. Again. Otra vez.
What? You don't speak Spanish. I wish you would quit doing that. That's been a source of contention in our household for probably 10 years at least.
Ever. Because I've always spoken Spanish.
You don't speak
in
Spanish,
our household.
Whatever. So we had this argument about how I'm the only one that's actually been paid for a language here. So technically I'm the qualified one here.
Mm-hmm. Got me on a technicality.
This is funny. So this chick talks about how much she speaks Spanish, and I do it at work, and I use it all the time. And this Spanish guy walks into the gym one day, just trying to get some information about some gym stuff.
Totally different verbiage from mouths to a gym.
This chick doesn't know one word this guy said. So here's my so-called...
Good thing Anna was there.
Here goes my so-called Spanish speaker, and I get nothing out of her.
That's me.
You're the worst. So what are we talking about today, bro?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Life.
It's going to be an uncomfortable one, bro.
Life lessons. Cool. Because it's been a stellar couple of weeks.
Okay, so let's start off right there then. What's been going on? What happened?
Communication. Back to communication. And I think that's going to be the forever work center for the rest of my years.
Well, let's not just say like communication as in like we're not good communicators, we don't have good communication, but there's a specific situation or almost like non-negotiable or taboo subjects that shut down communication for us. And they're super rare and they very rarely come around. And it was one of those things where when we started talking about it on Sunday.
Yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday, Sunday. That like we don't really have the tools around that because we haven't really fought. And there's a couple of reasons for why we haven't fought. One, we're really, really compatible and agree on almost everything, which we're just super lucky and super grateful for that. But the stuff that we do disagree on, we were so silent for probably the first 10 years around any of it. And then like kind of aware of it, but still not willing to have the conversations for another 6 or 7 years around it. And then now we're slowly like, no, we're not ignoring these things anymore. And we don't really know what to do with them.
Right.
So it kind of sucks a little bit.
I'm sure we're not the only two people that deal with this. And that is why there is so much knowledge out there at our fingertips to help kind of guide. And there's no right or wrong answer. And it may look different one day and different 3 months from now, but you don't know until you try. And then if that didn't work out, then you have to try some other way. And so it's an ongoing lesson that I think, like I said, it'll be, I think anybody that's ever been in any length of a relationship will be able to understand what we're trying to say and what we're working through, because there's no possible way that you can share a life with somebody and not have specific things that continue to come up, even if it's not applicable.
Yeah, it's like your thing that you never feel understood about.
Yes.
And you can't figure out how to articulate on your end to get them to understand, and they can't figure out why this is such a misunderstanding because, and it's two people trapped in their own perspectives and their own realities,
Right.
and then their own, beliefs slash truths around what this situation actually is. And then this one became ridiculously, unbelievably frustrating for me because it was like, I don't know how many times I could say, I just wanted to have a conversation. And it was like that simple to me. And I got to a point where like, I didn't even want to have the conversation anymore and even open up the conversation and even try to explain it anymore because you.
Well, it seemed like such a simple fix. In reality, it was. But in my mind, where I was, it was mountainous because it is the core of the only problem in our relationship. And so that was what I was viewing this specific instance as. And
what was
you were viewing.
What was the problem though? Like what? What's this like core problem that the way you see it, the language and how you define it in your head?
I guess I'll give the long answer. Being raised in the church, women are brought up to be a certain way, and in a relationship and in a home and as a mother and as a wife. And so my personality is one that just fits with that, like, just have faith, just don't question, just do this. And so that's what I did for a lot of years. And so anytime anything uncomfortable, or if you felt like something should be done this way and I felt like something should be done this way, if I sensed that it was going to cause contention or a disagreement, I immediately just reverted to appeasing and compromising. And in my emotional unintelligence at that point in time, compromising meant to me just to accept the other person's point of view. And so I just always felt like I didn't have a voice or like I could never be heard. But at the same time, I don't really like to say it like that because I never really allowed you to allow me to have a voice, because it was just easier for me to just
the silence,
be subservient.
The silence alone created the idea that we were good and we were communicating and it was
right.
Okay on my end, because I didn't know, because it was never verbalized. So I just assumed that everything was going according to however things are supposed to go. Now let's at least paint some of the beginning. And this is where some of my frustration came in, and some of the things that I felt like I got caught in a trap around specific insecurities of things that I created, obviously, which were in the initial part of our marriage and the initial part of our dating. Like, I didn't communicate very well, and I had a lot of anger built up, and and the moment I become frustrated and not able to articulate what I'm trying to say, I would just rather bully my way into getting my way and become super overly aggressive with verbal language, yelling and screaming, and then in a lot of cases breaking a lot of shit, doors and punching walls and smashing chairs on the floor. And it was just this like boyish, immature expression of like, I don't know how to verbalize this, and I don't know how to sit in this in a controlled manner. Here's my rage in its finest, so you can see exactly how frustrated I am. And then I would just walk away, and then that would be the end of it. And I think along with it, it just added another layer of enabling you to be more agreeable. One, you were raised to be more agreeable, and then two, you're like, well, fuck, I need to be agreeable because I don't want to see this side of this guy.
Right.
So, and again, back to the frustrating part, was the better part of, it was years. I mean, we can't put an exact date on it, but, in my head, I'm thinking 2005, 2006 ish, 2007 time frame. So 5 or 6 years that that beast, for a lack of better terms, is sort of quieted.
Right.
And then,
But so circling back to like a big piece of why we continue to circle back to this is a conditioned response for 18 years now is going to take a lot of effort on my part to recognize that I might be inferring or imagining this scenario where this beast is going to
like, when's it coming
surface,
back?
right?
Yeah, you're like, it's a.
So
You've seen the capabilities of my communication skills and the bad side of it.
right,
And so it's like, and then but that's, I think, a normal human response, because how we got to the place where we were at was something that I saw in you as your normal human response during a time that I'm not okay with.
right,
And so I, placed your label and your stereotype directly right back on top of you, being like, oh, here she is again.
right,
And it's something that you've been trying to be, and you've been trying to, like, that's not me. That was a part that taught me who I am today. And which is the same thing that I'm trying to do, where it's like, look, your inability to, like, come into conversations are built on a persona and an image that you have of me that isn't true anymore. And that's where my frustration started to come in, was like, that's not me. And I don't know how much harder I need to work in order to prove to you that that's not me. It's not coming back. It's never coming back. I haven't shown any of that in, X amount of time. Like, how much more do I have to prove to you? And then it started to turn into, like, this weird resentment of, like, I don't want to be a part of this anymore because I don't like the way it makes me feel. Like, I don't.
right,
And it all came down to, I asked a question about something, and you just gave me the typical, I don't know, and then responded a couple hours later on a text, and sort of in a roundabout way was like, you're being really aggressive and you're a bully. And I didn't even say anything. I just asked what this was, and you said, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, so we're not going to talk about this? And you're like, no, that interferes with my peace, for lack of better terms. And I vowed to never go back to that space again. And so in my response was like, oh, so I'm not even granted a conversation in this relationship anymore. Like, I can't even have feelings. And then the only person that can help me reconcile these feelings, or the person that's participating in this relationship, isn't even going to give me the luxury of a conversation. And so for me, that became a really serious topic, because that wasn't one, expectations that we had set up in the light of everything that we've been working through over the past year. And so one, it was like the expectations that we agreed upon, for a lack of better terms, that were very clearly spoken and verbalized, weren't being met. And then I felt like I didn't have a voice, and I was being shut out of the relationship in something that was very important to me. And so, and it sounds so super simple, and I don't know if there's a lot of people that are listening to this that are like, yeah, we always talk about the stupidest things, and then next thing you know, it's like we're spiraling into, like, talking about divorce. And it's like, well, that, like, what's the root cause of that specific thing? Because a lot of the times the things that are so simple are the things that are most important to us.
right.
Like, I just always want to be able to have an open conversation with you. That's what we agreed upon. And now you're telling me no.
Right. And so to piggyback on that, like, the most important piece of that for me, though, is knowing that there is a safe space in order to always have open communication. And if I don't feel like there's a safe space for communication, I have a hard time holding up my end of the bargain of always being open with communicating. And so,
well, and that's part of the snowball, because then I felt like that was bullshit. And it wasn't that I wasn't understanding you. It was just I was to a point now where I was like, I don't don't deserve for you to make me feel like I make you feel like that.
Right. No, I get, and we're gonna.
Yeah.
We could go on forever.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of times a
But
third
I wanna-
party is so valuable to help
But this is
navigate
why.
this.
But this is why I wanted to verbalize that, because there's probably somebody listening to this and being like, "Well, what the fuck did he just say?" Because it's like, it's ridiculous. It's like, I don't want to feel the way you're making me feel around the way you think I'm going to make you feel, which is like, we're just making a ton of assumptions. Like, well, if I have this
Well, but it's
conversation,
not assumptions. It's purely based off of our past. So
No,
you have to understand it is conditioned, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not made up. Like these are valuable feelings.
no, for sure. But my whole thing is that I don't. Not
You don't
that I'm
see yourself that way.
Not exactly. Like, not that I'm looking for a time frame, and I feel like I've worked way too hard for it to be not.
Right.
So
and again, you have really worked hard on your temper. So I'm not even talking about the temper. I'm specifically speaking more on having a space. Just having an open space. No judgment.
Which
no aggression. No.
Well, okay, so let's
picking.
talk about that, the poking and the picking and the aggression, like,
that's your personality.
No, but we talked
about
where that came from. Like, it doesn't, and I know this about myself, and we talked about it on multiple occasions. I'm like, hey, I'm totally open to a conversation, and I'm totally out until the moment I feel, or open until I feel like I'm being attacked personally. And then for me, that's where my ego starts to drive in, and that's where I'm like, okay, if you're going to try to go on the offense to try to subside me to prove your point or whatever, I can do that just as bad as you can. And here's what it looks like. And those are just like things that's
more, I think, created, though. I wish I would have spoken when I was thinking about it, but I didn't want to interrupt you. You were talking about how you go on the offense if you feel personally attacked, but I think that you're a Cancer through and through, and you are very sensitive.
Oh my gosh, here we go.
You are. You're very sensitive.
So let me get this straight. Let me get this straight. When you call me verbatim, strong personality, aggressive bully, which in my eyes is like, dude, I'm working way beyond harder than any single man should be. In my head, this is how my language works. To be considered,
I'm not talking about me.
I'll take strong personality.
I'm talking about with
bully?
Anybody that you talk to. If you disagree, and if you feel like they are coming at you, even though they aren't, let's just say that they aren't.
Sometimes their shit's ridiculous too, and it needs to be shut up.
Well, babe, that's not.
I'm just being funny.
No, you're not. That's not having an open space for communication.
No, but the thing is like, because I know what you're referring to, and some of those conversations that I get into is because they're trying to win the argument. They're trying to prove to be right, and it's like, that's not what this conversation is. Like, this isn't. If we're gonna have a prove the right conversation, then let's do that, because I'm gonna make you look ridiculous.
Well, I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily the case, because I don't ever.
No, for sure. And I think in our context, it's always like, you sort of want to puff up a little bit because you don't want to be this agreeable, walked over person anymore, and you're like, I'm not gonna be that, and here's how I'm gonna show my strength with just this slight attack and nudge and push. And I'm like, wait, why did we have to go there? This isn't a battle for dominance in this conversation, but if you want it to be, then let's go. So, and that's something that I need to work on, obviously, is like, I can't go into, like, if the intention of what the conversation is, regardless of how regardless if that's how I'm taking those situations, is like, oh, okay, we're gonna have a verbal dominance battle right now. Like, I have to now step out and go, this isn't a verbal dominance thing. This is just them showing a bit of insecurity, or hey, I'm not willing to be walked on right now, or showing a little bit of like firm ground on their end to make them feel like they can stand in this conversation instead of it being, an
A
all out
personal attack, right?
war.
Right. Well, and that's kind of important to circle back to the amount of studying and books read and podcasts listened to and meditations and healing meditation, just all of the things that we've been working on. It makes so much sense, and there is so much healing to be had when you work through all of and make sense of how all of your experiences have created who you are. And then it also allows you to see how you have failed terribly as a partner, even though your best of intention was just to love so fiercely and so unconditionally. Codependency is something that just kind of new for my own understanding of the word. And I realized that a lot of the reason that you are today is because of me and because I enabled it and encouraged it, if you will.
It was over supportive.
Right. And
in an unhealthy way.
Right. But I had seen you suffer enough in your early years that I was hell bent to see it end. And so,
which is funny because that's your ego. Like, I'm going to save you.
Right. Yeah.
I
knew I could do it. Yeah. For sure. So I'm saying, like, that is the beauty of all the things that I've learned, is how I can see how I have contributed negatively to this situation. And I know that you've done your own work on controlling your temper and trying to.
There is no temper, just so you know.
This is true. But working on yourself. But I have to also change how I am with you. And that's what I was trying to do. And it felt as if I was puffing up to you or standing up to you or not willing to compromise or not willing to talk it through. And my timing is poor. And I've explained this too.
No, but it's
only feel comfortable bringing up uncomfortable situations or discussions when we're already in the midst of what I assume is an argument or what I assume is some discomfort. So I never want to rock the boat when we're good, which is 95% of the time. So when we do get into one of those spaces, you literally do always end up wanting to divorce me because it's so few and far between.
That is not true.
And you're sick of letting it get there. But it's like...
Well, yeah. So, and I think you're equating to wanting to separate or exploring what that looks like as like, oh, this is his threat in order to win and get his way.
No,
and
I didn't say that.
No. But that's where I'm just trying to talk this whole thing out, because those are things that, like, when I've left and I'm like trying to get in my own space to try to figure this out, I'm like, oh, here we fucking go again. Like, you're exploring this again, which I can think of 4 or 5 times in 18 years where I'm like, dude, we're just not compatible. It's just, this doesn't work.
It's such a small percentage.
Like,
but
why? And my whole thing is it's like, everyone talks about this definition of insanity. It's like we just keep doing the same thing. And at what point am I like, I don't want to contribute to this insanity anymore? Like, are we just better off without each other? And then it got to a point where it was like, do I even actually want to live with the potential of this being a thing moving forward?
Right.
And that's where I got, where it was like, I wanted to set an expectation for myself of like, no, this isn't acceptable in any relationship that you're in. If someone's just going to tell you to shut the fuck up and like, we're not going to talk about this, like.
By the way, I've never said those words.
I'm using my language. Like, that's one of those things that's like, I'm like, no, like, that's, the conversation is always on the table. Nothing's taboo. And so to circle back on how this all actually started, I was helping you with something, and some photos had come up that had triggered the emotions and the time frames and some of the stuff during the affair. And I was like, hey, what are these? And that was really it. And I knew as soon as I asked it, and I knew based on your reaction was like, okay, she's not going to want to talk about this because she thinks it's associated with the affair, which in a weird second, third, fourth effects, it was. All it was like, what is this? I've never seen these. Look at the time dates on them. Can we just reconcile this real quick so I don't have to plug holes and assume that this is something that it's not? Just give me the clarification so I can go, okay, yeah, we talked about that. Cool. And just moved on. And so when it's linked to that specific time and you're like, no, we're not going to have this fucking conversation because it disrupts my peace. It's like, whoa, what? So that's where I think, because it was such a traumatic event, which you're never going to get over.
Right.
Like you're never going to, the loss of a dear friend or a family member, like it never goes away. Like life just gets bigger around it, and you build bigger and more beautiful things and the lessons and the meanings out of it, which is exactly what we've done out of the affair. But that doesn't mean that trauma and that sadness isn't there if new information arises, which is kind of what that was. It was like this weird new information, like why is this here? Can you just answer this real quick? I really don't, I would have rather if you deleted those photos 6 months ago, and I would have never come across them, and then we wouldn't even be having this conversation today. But it's still a valuable lesson one way or another. And so when I really started peeling everything back, it didn't have anything to do with the affair and those kind of things. It was just the fact that you were now dictating that this subject was off limits no matter what, and we're not going to have the conversation. And it's like, oh, okay, so now there's specific taboo things in our relationship that we can no longer talk about. And that was something that I had to sit back and go, okay, is this something that's compatible with the way that you want to communicate moving forward and the types of connections that you want with people moving forward? And the answer was no. It was 100% no. So then in my head, I was like, okay, there's no other option.
Right.
We just don't fit. Like we have a fundamental foundational communication disbelief, and neither of us want to compromise on that. And that's such a serious thing in a relationship when you start talking about communication. Like you're both going to sit there and stand your ground and go, no, these are both off limits for either of us, and this is non-negotiable for either of us. And it's like, dude, you're just you're not compatible anymore. Like you're not. Like that's a fundamental problem that is just going to fester and compound and build over time, and which I've seen happen. Because I've tried to have conversations with you from 2011 until everything came out. And that's where my growing frustration came from, where it was like, no, I'm not going to be shut out of conversations anymore. And I drew that line in the sand last year when this whole affair came out.
Right.
So it was just one of those things where it was the first instance where you were like, more or less showing that like, okay, we've put a lot of work in, but in one of the areas that is so important for us moving forward and keeping this thing alive, you're actually not willing to do it. And it was the first opportunity for it to be presented. And then of course the miscommunication is like, oh, it's not that I wasn't willing to do that. Here was the reason all of this was actually getting shut off, and not actually, because as of yesterday, for us actually talking this whole thing out and having this conversation, if you would have told me, no, I never want to talk about that again, and it just is what it is, I don't think we'd be sitting here today. I think we'd still be sleeping in separate bedrooms, and still, because it's such a fundamental breakdown of something that
I think
I
though
need
that
in a relationship.
Sure. But I think that you also realize though, like from my really poor explanation of how I've gotten to where I am as far as the fear that I have. And it's, I hate to use that word, but that is the word.
It is. It's a fear. It's okay.
I just feel like I put so much on the line, and I let you do and say and whatever you needed to do during that initial healing time. And I just felt like I cannot open Pandora's box again. I cannot go back into that space. And I know after talking more with you that it's not going to go back to that space, but that was just the immediate fear that I had. And I just want so desperately to keep our home in a safe space where everyone can continue growing and realize that life is so good and we've learned a lot and we've worked so hard, and there's nothing to worry about for you, for me, for the kids.
Okay.
But I mean, that's the nuts and bolts of it, and we've talked through it. There's just a lot. It's just a lot. But again, it's a hell of a lot better than being not together. I'd take a lot of work.
Are you trying to convince me to stay?
Bro.
Is that what happened?
Please.
This is another thing we joked about too, that if you weren't half as hot as you are, you want to get away with half the shit you do. You better roll your eyes over there. Oh, man. No, but I mean, this is also another one of those, I think,
Thank you.
obviously one of the things so I'm reading a book right now on the immature masculine, the mature masculine, called The King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover, which is an interesting perspective on, like philosophies of Carl Jung. And I think it's just one of those things where, like, for me, it's really important to stay in touch with the vulnerability and those insecurities, and always knowing that me as the male psyche part of this side is that I always have a space to express my frustrations and my aggressions and my insecurities and my communication pieces. And that's a really hard, vulnerable spot for me to be in when I have to sit into something that is so sad and traumatic, in the sense, because if you really sit back and, like, if you go, like, man shit, ego and all these other kind of things, like, when your wife has an affair on you, it's one of those things where you're like, it's like a kick in the fucking face to, like, everything that you think about yourself. And all it does is just magnify and explode all your insecurities of, like, oh shit, everything that I was doubting of myself is actually true, because that's why she went out and left me and chose somebody else over me, which we all know is bullshit and it's nonsense, and that's just communication and language you need to work through your head. But then you start going into a space where you want to feel safe to express and explore those things, and, like, hey, you're making me feel like X. And then for a man to be sort of in touch with his feminine flow side instead of his, like, masculine, rational, these other kind of sides, his nurturing and caring side, and, like, opening up and being like, hey, this is where I'm at, and getting shut off, is just one of those things where you now go back to, like, your warrior mode, where you're like, oh, okay, fine, I'm gonna stick to my values that are non-negotiables, and the idea and the romanticized notions of life, and you don't fit those anymore. And so I think that's where a lot of that came from, is that we all have our defense mechanisms that protect the things that we're trying to keep from taking over, because they can be all consuming. So, like, fears and your insecurities and these other kind of things is like, if someone's making you feel like those things, you're either going to bury or put up walls or attach to a different archetype or characteristic inside of you to combat those other emotions and feelings instead of actually dealing with them. And those things, again, can be completely consuming for people. And that was obviously, from the age of 20 to 25, where, I would have rather have just broken shit and punched stuff and screamed just to get people to shut the fuck up so I didn't even have to have the conversation. And those are things that, again, trying to stay super vulnerable and leave everything out on the table, because that's how I feel is the only way for me to harness all of the different types of the things that I know are a part of like my psyche. And because I don't consider myself like one of these like normal dudes, I guess, for lack of better
Right.
terms. I mean, like, to want to, to be so far on the extremes of the masculine and A-type and these other sides, but then have so many different feminist or feminist qualities, for lack of better terms. Like, I want to deploy overseas and kill terrorists more than almost anything on the planet, but I also want to be here to, play my ukulele and oil paint and, spend time and be able to talk about emotions and connect with, my kids and you and, all these other kind of things. So it's like, to harness those things and to keep them cultivated and growing without a completely open space of honesty and vulnerability. I feel, for me personally, that connection and foundation is too fragile without that stuff. And so I think that's where, my need to want to protect that space to keep all of those things that I think are important about myself and that complete me as a human being thriving and growing. I have to protect that space at all costs.
Right.
I don't know if I explained that correctly. It sounded super weird.
No, I mean, it was a long, lengthy explanation and my mind kind of wandered here and there, but I understand exactly what you're reading and what you're talking about within yourself, because I know you. But I guess this can just kind of carry us into our next topic, and that's the relationship that, we understand the archetypes and masculine and feminine, but I think it changes a little bit when you're dealing with relationships with your children. And we have to be really mindful that it takes a lot for them to be vulnerable, especially our children, because of just this last 6 years, I'll say. Our son was always the easy kid, and he never needed much parenting. And so we didn't ever really have this fundamental sound relationship with him to where he felt like he could come to us openly and have some of these conversations to try to help him work through whatever it is that he needs to work through at this point in his life. And a lot of it has to do...
Yeah, but I also, not to interrupt you, but I think you're being really hard on yourself because he's 17. He's
For
getting ready to
sure.
graduate high school. He's like...
all of those things. But at the same time, you just learn a lot of lessons in life. And that's one lesson that I've learned is it is important that you don't miss the opportunities. You can't ever get time back, but you can certainly do the best you can to work with the time that you have. And so, that's all that you can do. And we'll do things a little differently with Trinley. We have a lot more time with her, but...
Well, that's totally different because you're talking about a boy versus a girl.
True. But at the same time, if they don't feel like they have a place to communicate without feeling judged or without being shut down immediately because it's maybe different than what we believe, even if it's something as stupid as Coke and Doritos and Starbursts, like, that's just one example, and it's not stupid. It's important. But
what's wrong with Coke, Doritos, and Starburst?
what I'm saying is that that's not something that's allowed to be had every single time you come home from work. That needs to be like once a week.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Well, no, but I also think so. This is another thing that I've been really trying to think about with Tristan on why he's become so secluded and getting quieter. And I know for a fact it is just the part of the transition of where he's at, getting ready to graduate high school. What's the next step? Because everything is dictated and told to them from the time they're freshmen until
right. There's so much
midway
unknown.
as a senior. Like, you don't have to do anything. It's just like be here at 8,
Right.
leave here at 9, go to the next place at 9:15.
Exactly.
It's like everything's dictated to you. Now he has to make decisions on his own. And he's also now in a space where obviously dating girls is a little bit different. Hormones are doing what hormones are doing. Our year probably didn't help because they witnessed and heard and sat in
Right.
on
It was just more unknown.
all of that. Yeah. So I think there's that, like, what is going on with my parents? Are they getting divorced? Are they leaving? My dad's an absolute psychopath.
Right. All of these things for sure.
And having to make all these other things. And then it's the same thing with Trinley. It just so happens that, like, she's at that time where hormones are kicking in and the social part of girls in junior high is wicked. And they get caught in this unknown in their home life and they get trapped in that cycle and haven't been able to see.
Right. They just don't have the tools. They have no idea how to
But that's what
handle
I'm
that.
saying. Like, they haven't been able to see what's been happening between me and you over the past 9 months, because I think it's the highest level of relationships, of marriages that I've ever seen, as far as the way two people communicate and talk and spend time with each other and laugh. And it's in front of them. The example is in front of them and they can't even see it.
Right.
But I also think that for Tristan's sake, and I think there's a whole bunch of factors inside of there. I think there's expectations that he thinks need to be a part of his life because that they're a part of our lives and they're our example. High achieving parents, successful, fit, healthy, all these things where it's like fitness isn't on his radar, like career and success isn't on his radar. But I think there's just this idea or almost pedestal of idolizing mentality of like what your parents are, and then those insecurities and doubt based on your hormones and where you're at and the transition you're getting ready to make, of like how many potential failures are now in front of you, trying to meet the expectations of the examples that have been presented to you in your life. And so I think
well, it's just hard. It's just hard to be a parent, especially when you're trying to teach kind of against the flow.
It's super unconventional.
Trying to teach them about mindset and trying to teach them that this constant influx of information at your fingertips at all times is not good for you. And they're like looking at you crazy, like, Mom, everybody does it. And it's like, well, that doesn't mean it's right. Just because that's our new social norm, quote unquote, doesn't mean that it's right or healthy. And so I'm not trying to ostracize them by making them complete effing weirdos in the sense of all their peers. But at the same time, I want you to be better. I want more for you. And I know I can't force them to learn these lessons because their frontal lobe hasn't formed and they can't grasp what I'm trying to teach them.
Yeah, but that's a hard thing to say, that you want more for them, because it's putting a certain level of pressure of like, well, what's wrong with me as I am?
Nothing
at their age.
But I'm saying they can't. Careful. Sure.
And I'm saying they can't comprehend that right now.
And that's why I'm very careful about the words that I choose, because again, circling back to, you think you're doing the best thing that you can for them or for your spouse or whatever. And it's like, just by saying you're so naturally smart, or you're so naturally artistic, or you're so naturally good at weightlifting, the second you're no longer naturally good because everyone else is catching up to me, and I don't know how to handle that, because if I'm not naturally good, then what am I? I have never had to work before, so what am I not good? Am I not? Do I just quit this? Do I need to? Do I like? It's just more questioning then is necessary. And so that is kind of what I've learned, especially with the whole mindset thing that I'm working on with the kids, is just be very careful about what you are recognizing. Always recognize the effort, not whatever is innate. Even if it is, just recognize the effort applied so that they know it's the work that has to happen in order to continue to succeed. And if you have to work hard at something to be good at it, more the better for you. I think you'll appreciate it more.
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be a little bit of that where, like, they haven't been challenged, and then now life is challenging them. So it's
Right.
like everything was really easy because, like, I could imagine before, because a lot of people had that perception of just me and you in general. They're like, fuck, these people are just crushing life. Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? Their marriage is amazing. Their kids are amazing. They should, da 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 da. But it's like we have the same problems with everybody else. But imagine our kids growing up in that, where it's like, fuck, my parents own businesses. They work really good jobs. They have hundreds of people that are asking them for advice, and that, like, we don't have any issues at home, and we eat dinner together and family night every Friday, and we don't want for nothing. There's not a lot of, I'm not trying to say they're spoon fed, but as far as like emotional instability and financial instability and the extra stressors that can happen in kids' lives during those developmental phases, none of that existed for them. And then all of a sudden, in a matter of 30 days,
Right. So, I mean, they're going
you
to be
know,
better for it. They just have to learn how to talk, and we're getting there, and it's
well, they've
so
never had to.
beautiful.
Yeah,
No,
they've
they've
never
never
had
had to. And so that's where, again, just making sure that they feel like they have the space to talk, even if, the outcome is still, I'm sorry, you're grounded.
to. Well, yeah, but it's such an important lesson because, our kids, I don't know how many times we can verbalize to them, hey, if you need to talk about anything, just let me know. Like, they've never been really in trouble for getting caught with things. We just talk about, what are some different consequences that can happen out of this? What are some other things? We've always had very rational conversations with them. They've never really had like big, huge consequences of like,
Right. Fortunately, we're lucky, but we're now heading into the time where he is officially going to be an adult and will be considered such when it comes to consequences. And that is scary.
no, but what I'm saying is like parents we put a lot of pressure on ourselves of like, why aren't my kids talking to me? They know they have a space. Like, why are they continuing to make these mistakes? Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? And it's like me, I just go back to when I was that age, and it was like, I don't want to fucking talk to my parents. I don't want to talk to my uncles and my grandparents and whatever. It didn't matter how safe the space was, or if it was there's a little bit of them feeding their own ego of like, oh, I got this. And I don't need anybody to help me. That, I think that's just a normal human progression in the beginning where you don't.
Well, they have figured it out. It may not be the healthiest way, and eventually they'll circle back
No,
to it
I
and
mean,
realize
exactly,
that
but
it's
that's
not figured out. Like, you're just burying shit, or
no, but what I'm saying is like now they're getting tastes of emotional instability. Like they've seen that and been like, whoa, wait, maybe I can't do this on my own. Why is this not getting better? What is going on? And like that seasoning and that time and that experience. And this is one thing I have conversations with people all the time is like, you can't try to own your children's experiences. Like they have to feel those themselves. They have to hurt themselves. You can't take their pain away and try to ease their sadness from them and sit down and, coddle them to death. Like you have to let them experience and own and embrace their own situations.
for
like
sure.
you can set
But
the
what I was getting
boundaries.
at, the bigger piece of what I was getting at is like when they finally open up to you, regardless of if it's, you have to drop your ego completely. It has to be gone because they say things and it's hurtful and they don't mean it, but that's just how they feel. And you just have to detach from that. You have to let them say what they're feeling and then try to help them make sense of it, what really is. But again, that just comes with repeating and having more talks and more conversations. That finally, I feel like, is kind of a wall that I've been able to break through with him, especially, is just letting him know that he can say whatever it is that he's feeling, regardless if I'm looking at him like, I had no idea.
Yeah, but to another thing, like I just watched that. It was called Liberated, the new sexual revolution on Netflix. It's a documentary on, it's essentially Panama City Beach, Florida during spring break. And they just follow a couple college kids around. And they follow a couple girls around, and like their perceptions and ideas of what masculinity and femininity actually means in the new age. And obviously one of the central topics of this whole thing was intimacy and what sex is now, which is a big important part of relationships and growing up and emotional connection and some other stuff. And I mean, across the board, these girls and these guys are talking about, no, this just isn't spring break. This is just how it is now from the time I was 15 until, now. The pressures and the ideas of what relationships and emotions actually are being stripped away. And they're just acting like none of it's even happening. Oh, sex is emotionalist and I have to do these specific things to be considered a man, which they're so ridiculously superficial and don't have anything to do with like taking responsibility and providing, growing and maturing and all these other kind of things. And it was probably the most disheartening documentary I think I've probably watched in the past 10 years of the mentality of that generation moving through, which is Tristan's generation, essentially.
Well, and that's just what we as parents and especially awake parents and parents that are trying to let them be in this world, but maybe not necessarily of it as it is in this current moment. It's hard. This is just their time, and I don't think it's secure in us talk, but what more can you do other than just keep trying to let them know that I know that this may seem like it's the norm because everybody is doing it and that's what everybody in your generation does, and why can't you guys see that this is normal? Well,
yeah, trying to get them to connect internally with what they actually feel,
right?
And what biology is actually presenting them, because both of those two things are being ignored.
Right.
It's just like, no, there's these fake standards and puppets that are showing us what it looks like, and this is what it looks like, so I have to do that even though I feel it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And my biology is telling me it's wrong.
Right.
And then they just and I don't know if it's just an exposure thing, because they're not even taught how to expose their own emotions and look at them and deal with them and understand what biology is giving us.
Right.
They're just on their phone, scroll TV. What are my friends talking about?
Mm-hmm.
What's the industry trying to sell me right now? And it's affecting, because now you're talking about the psychology and the wiring and the pathways of the brain.
Right.
Are, I don't want to say more powerful than your emotions and biology and what physiology is giving you, but your brain can dictate.
Right. If that's all that they're seeing all day long with their peers and with whatever's coming through on their phones or computers, then that is their reality. That's what they have manifested. That's what they believe. I mean, that is. So until they're, it's not like we can just homeschool them and only allow them, that's right. That's what I'm saying. Like you can't be on this extreme where you completely ostracize them and then they have no place in the world. But I don't want to just let them just do what everyone else is doing. And so it's hard.
Yeah, but that is a hard conversation, because then it's like we all want to feel accepted.
Absolutely.
And if this is
especially at this age.
if
their
this is
age.
what society and culture is now, is that what's right and emotionally acceptable now?
Yeah.
Which is sort of hard because, like, again, back to that documentary, it was all just about, spring break was like, it's hookup culture is what they were calling it. Essentially, like, they don't, even the girls were like, yeah, sex doesn't mean anything anymore. And I mean, and these guys were literally like, hey, what's up? Oh, you're Anna? Hey, come with me real quick. And they would just literally go in a hotel room, bang, and leave. And he'd be like, oh, hopefully I'll see you later. And then another girl would walk by and he'd just hit on her and then try to. And it was just this like unemotional, detached. And you could tell it was like draining the souls of all of them. But there's 100,000 teenagers doing the exact same thing. And
yeah.
So
that's crazy.
Yeah, but it sounds crazy to us. But is
For
it
sure.
like, is that because it still does. This is what's fucked up about it, is it still does what nature's end goal is, which is reproduction. So it just so happens that we're conscious.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, if the organism is reproducing, like, it doesn't matter if it's reproducing into an industry where the food you eat just makes you fat and worse, and the medications you take just kill you slowly or make you more numb. It doesn't matter. The organism's reproducing. Which is a fucked up conversation.
Yep. So, moral of today's podcast is just make a choice. Try to teach where you can.
Yeah, but I think that's it.
And keep learning.
I think the whole thing is it just, our duty as parents, since we're talking about parents, and even duty to ourselves and to our relationships, is to be the example of what you're trying to see,
for sure,
come out of it. Like, I just want to see a human being that's connected and awake as continue growing. Well, then I need to be that example for that. If I want my relationship to have an open, honest, safe space, then I need to be the example of an open, honest, and safe space to
always
keep that communication rolling.
For sure. And to just remember to come from a place of love, and that will always, always set the tone and set the stage for anything.
I think coming from a place of love, but then being kind in your actions
and thoughtful in your words,
because that's
for sure.
That's the flip side. Is my intentions could be to love somebody, but I can destroy people based on my intentions of love.
For sure.
But if you're always meeting things with kindness, it's really hard to destroy things with absolute kindness. So
it's true.
I think the actions behind it need to be kind, and the intention needs to be filled with love.
Yep. Cheers to that.
You cutting me off, bro?
Yeah, I think that was a good final thought.
Well, good deal. Thanks for chatting with me today, even though all day you were like, you piece of shit, I don't want to talk to you, I hate your guts.
Again, those words never came out of my mouth.
I'm pretty sure that's how it went down.
No. I said, hey, are we going to work on my compass today? And
I don't remember any of this. This is all a lie.
Of course you don't.
This is all a lie.
Right.
So in conclusion, we're going to stay married.
Yes, we are.
For the time being. Until the next one.
For the indefinite time being.
Why do you say that? You can't speak in definites.
Indefinite.
You can, in a month, decide that you don't want to be married to me anymore. That's happened before.
I'm pretty sure I'm on a different journey. Pretty sure I'm a different person.
Well, I know that one of the things I said to somebody today was that, because I think some people were shocked in our communication and where we go and how we like to reconcile things. And it really just stood on the basis of, we talked about the intention and what our actions need to be behind. But I also think keeping in mind that the journey of the individuals that you're involved with, if you truly want them to just be happy, then you'll allow their shit to just be whatever it is. And so, if it's
within reason.
no, I mean, yeah, for sure. There are unhealthy things that you just don't want to like.
Right. As long as it's not harming my children,
my spouse just wants to do meth all the time. It's like, you might want to intervene. But, but what I mean is like if I'm exploring a space where I don't think this is the right relationship for my soul and my well-being and my future and where I'm trying to go, then that's an honest space that needs to be explored.
For sure.
And you need to sit back and look at the happiness of the individual. And if you do truly love them, sometimes people are happier without you.
Absolutely.
And so letting certain people go out of your life can actually be a peaceful thing for yourself, because then
well, and for them.
Yeah, that you're not just some kind of burden and you're just selfishly keeping somebody around because of your own shit.
Yeah.
And that's just a heavy thing for me to think about, to have somebody connected to me because I made them feel like they needed to be a part of it through guilt or whatever for my own selfish reasons. That hurts me and almost terrifies me to even think that, like, do I have relationships like that now in my life? And like, do I need to re-examine some things? So,
I hope not.
No, I mean, I don't think so. I mean, we just confirmed that we're going to.
Well, there's more people in your life than just me, bro.
We're going to continue to work. But there is no doubt that I think that next level of our love, I think that's unbreakable, is our relationship as it sits right now as an intimate couple. Do I think that's unbeatable or unbreakable? I don't know. I think, time is,
like you said, I think
time is the only thing for that. But I know our love for each other is, 100% unbeatable and unbreakable. So that's good. It's a good place to be.
Gotta start somewhere.
Oh, man. I love you, bro.
I love you. Happy Monday.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Next time.
Be early.